Chapter 2 of The Adopting of Rosa Marie by Carol Watson Rankin. This recording is in the public domain. Rosa Marie. Not long after Mabel's ineffectual attempt to borrow an orphan, Mrs. Bennet dispatched her small daughter to Lake Street to find out, if possible, why Mrs. Maloney, the poultry woman, had failed to send the week's supply of fresh eggs. Now the way to Mrs. Maloney's was most interesting, particularly to a young person of observing habits. There were houses on only one side of the street, and most of those were tumbling down under the weight of sand that each rain carried down the hillside. But the opposite side of the road was even more attractive, for there one had a grassy, shrubby bank, where one could pick all sorts of things off bushes and get burrs in one's stockings, a narrow stretch of pebbled beach where one could sometimes find an agate, and a wide basin of very shallow water where one could almost, but not quite, step from stone to stone without wetting one's feet. It was certainly an enjoyable spot. The distance from Mabel's home to Mrs. Maloney's was very short, a matter of perhaps 5 blocks. But if a body went the longest way around, stopped to scour the green bank for belated blackberries, prickly hazelnuts, dazzling goldenrod, or rare four-leaved clovers, or loitered to gather a dress skirtful of stony treasures from the glittering beach, going to Mrs. Maloney's meant a great deal more than a 5 blocks journey. Just a little beyond the poultry woman's house, on the lake side of the straggling street, a small but decidedly attractive point of land jutted waterward for perhaps 200 feet. On this projecting point stood a small shanty or shack, built, as Mabel described it later, mostly of knotholes. She meant, without knowing how to say it, that the lumber in the hut was of the poorest possible quality. On this long-to-be-remembered day, a small object moved in the clearing that surrounded the shack, attracted Mabel's attention. Curiosity led her closer to investigate. "It's just as I thought!" exclaimed Mabel, peering rapturously through the bushes. "It's a real baby!" Sure enough, it was a baby. Mabel edged closer, moving cautiously for fear of frightening her unexpected find. She saw a small toddler, aged somewhere between 2 and 3 years, roving aimlessly about the chip-strewn clearing. The child's round cheeks, chubby wrists, bare feet, and sturdy legs were richly brown. A straggling fringe of jet-black hair overhung the stout baby's black, bead-like eyes. Near the doorway of the rickety shack, a man, half French, half Indian, stood talking earnestly with many gesticulations to a dark-skinned woman, framed by the doorway. The woman had large black eyes shaded by very long black lashes. She wore her rather coarse black hair in 2 long, thick braids that hung in front of her straight shoulders. In spite of her dark color, her worn shoes, her ragged, untidy gown, she seemed to Mabel an exceedingly pretty woman. The man, too, was handsome, after a bold, picturesque fashion, but the woman was the more pleasing. Mabel approached timidly. She felt that she was intruding. "Good morning," she said, ingratiatingly. "Is this your little boy?" "Him girl," returned the woman, with a sudden flash of white teeth between parted crimson lips. "Name Rosa Marie. Yes, him ma petite daughter. You like the looks on him, hey?" "Oh, so much!" cried Mabel impulsively. "Oh, would you do me a favor?" "A favor," repeated the woman, with a puzzled glance. "What is a favor?" "Oh, would you lend your baby to me? Would you let me have her to play with? Oh, for all day?" "Here?" queried the mother doubtfully. "No, not here. In my own home, up there on the hill. Could I keep her until 6 o'clock? I just adore babies, and she's so fat and cunning. Oh, please, please, I'd be just awfully obliged." A look of understanding flashed suddenly between the man and the woman. But Mabel, stooping to make friends with little Rosa Marie, did not observe it. "Your fader 'ave nice house, plainty food, plainty money?" queried the woman, running a speculative eye over Mabel's plain but substantial wardrobe. "Oh, yes," returned Mabel thoughtlessly. "And besides, I have a playhouse. It isn't exactly mine, but I just about live in it with 3 other girls, and that's where I want to take Rosa Marie. I'll be awfully careful of her if you'll only let me take her. Oh, do you think she'll come with me? Couldn't you tell her to?" The woman, bending to look into Rosa Marie's black eyes, talked loudly and rapidly in some foreign tongue. The mother's voice was harsh, but her eyes, Mabel noticed, seemed soft and tender, and much more beautiful than Rosa Marie's. "Now," said the woman, turning to Mabel and speaking in broken English, "if you want her, You must go at once. Go now, I tell you. Go queek, queek. Pull hard, if she east drag behind. But go, I tell you, go!" The voice rose to an unpleasant, almost too stirring pitch that jarred suddenly on Mabel's nerves. But, obeying these hasty instructions, the little girl drew Rosa Marie out of the enclosure, led her across the street, and lifted her to the sidewalk. Looking back from the slight elevation, Mabel noticed that the man was again talking earnestly and gesticulating excitedly, while the woman, once more framed by the doorway, followed with her big black eyes the chubby figure of Rosa Marie. "I'll bring her back all safe and sound," shouted Mabel over her shoulder. "Don't be afraid. Good by until 6 o'clock." Escorting Rosa Marie to Dandelion Cottage proved no light task. Her legs were very short. It soon became evident that she was not accustomed to using them for walking purposes. The way was mostly uphill, and the little brown feet were bare. At first Mabel led, coaxed, and encouraged with the utmost patience. But presently Rosa Marie sat heavily on the sidewalk and refused to rise. That is, she didn't say that she wouldn't rise. She remained sitting with such firmness of purpose that it seemed hopeless to attempt to break her of the habit. Mabel walked round and round her firmly seated charge in helpless despair. Rosa Marie and the sidewalk were one. "Want any help?" asked a friendly voice. It belonged to a large, freckled boy who carried 2 pails of water from the lake to one of the tumble-down houses. "Yes, I do," responded Mabel promptly. "If you could just lift this child high enough for me to get a hold of her, I think I could carry her." So the boy, setting his pails down, obligingly lifted Rosa Marie's solid little person. Mabel clasped the barrel-shaped body closely, and after a word of thanks to the kind boy, proceeded homeward. But even now her troubles were not ended. By silently refusing to cuddle, Rosa Marie converted herself into a most uncomfortable burden. Her entire body was a silent protest against leaving her home. "Do make yourself soft and bunchy," pleaded Mabel, giving Rosa Marie sundry pokes calculated to make her double up like a jackknife. "Here, bend this way. Haven't you any joints anywhere? Do hold tight with your arms and legs. This way. Pshaw! You're just like a stuffed crocodile. Well, walk then, if you can't hang on like a real child. There's one thing certain, you shan't sit down again. I suppose we'll get there sometime." End of chapter 2.